Hello and a warm welcome and great thanks to each of you for joining us today and participating in our Peace Engineering webinar series. And thank you so much again for our esteemed presenters who are joining us today. My name is Christina White. I'm one of the executive committee members of IFEES, helping design and implement our webinar series. IFEES, under the auspice of our capacity building arm, IDEA, offers capacity building webinars for engineering educators and stakeholders. Each of our webinars tackles cutting edge and controversial topics in engineering and engineering pedagogy, facilitated by the top-rated professionals from academia and industry. All of our webinars are hosted on our YouTube channel, so we encourage you to view our past webinars. Today's webinar is going to focus on exploring complex aspects of peace engineering education. We encourage you to use the chat and Q&A function of our Zoom platform so that indeed we can engage as a community of global scholars. Today we will have three presenters join us. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Ramiro Jordan. Dr. Jordan is a scientist, inventor, educator, and entrepreneur. He is a faculty member of the Electrical and Computer Engineering Department at the University of New Mexico and is currently the Associate Dean of Engineering for International Programs. Dr. Jordan is the founder of the Ibero-American Science and Technology Education Consortium, ISTEC, a successful nonprofit organization that was created in 1990 with the mission to accelerate STEM education, R&D, and entrepreneurship in Ibero-America. Today, he will share with us the context of our upcoming WEEF, which is focused on peace engineering. After Dr. Jordan, we'll hear from Dr. Michael Milligan and then also Dr. Robert Muscat. But first, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Jordan. Again, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning and welcome to the webinar. I'm going to introduce the topic, which also is the topic of the World Engineering Education Forum and the Global Engineering Deans Council event that will take place in Albuquerque, New Mexico, November 12th through the 16th. I hope you can see my screen. So the topic again is peace engineering. What we're trying to do is invite people to help us define what is peace engineering. Here are some fields. I know it touches STEM, it touches the arts, it touches innovation, creativity, entrepreneurship, also ethics, which is very, very important for nowadays, especially if we're dealing with sustainability. What we did for this event in November is came up with a thought-provoking paper, which is on the web that people can download. And several of us decided to come up with a series of questions so we can provoke people to submit papers. So here are some of the questions. I mean, what is the global engineer? Some of the questions that we ask people. How do we bring peace engineering, ethics, employability, policy, mobility, for instance? We also looked at the problems in society and some opportunities. We asked some of the questions there that you can see in the presentation. We also touched another area. How can we come up with an effective engagement? How do we address diversity, for instance? How do we embrace accountability? We also asked questions in two other areas. How do we come up with an ecosystem and processes? How do we how do we manage for global impact in engineering? How many new models can we create? What do the emerging economic models imply in engineering? Everybody now is talking about Industry 4.0, 5.0, which is another name for the circular economy. So these are some of the questions that we ask people. so they can prepare themselves and submit papers. The themes for the conference are 1 through 4. You can see the 5 themes. How do we teach and learn about peace engineering? How do we do hands-on education, entrepreneurship, and challenges? So I'm gonna stop here, and again, I wanna thank you for participating, and we look forward to hearing from you and receiving your comments, questions to make this peace engineering thing more attractive and help us define the topic of peace engineering. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jordan. And we are really looking forward to our upcoming WEEF and GEDC. And we hope that our global community continues to engage in the deep thinking that this topic certainly calls for. I'm excited to next introduce Dr. Michael Milligan, who's the Executive Director and Chief Education Officer of ABET, the global accreditor of college and university programs in the STEM disciplines. Dr. Milligan is responsible for all aspects of ABET global operations. Under his leadership, the organization has increased its geographical reach and diversity, and it now represents 35 member societies and over 3,700 accredited programs in 30 countries. Today, he's going to present a topic around sustainable education, readying today's higher education students to tackle the world's grand challenges. In this webinar, Dr. Milligan will discuss the important role that higher education plays in better preparing students to lead on the global challenges related to issues such as population growth, environmental concerns, and the depletion of human resources. He'll also share with us insights and a preview of a new report on ABET. And we look forward to having you engage again with your chat function and Q&A. I'll now turn it over to Dr. Milligan.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Christina, for that nice introduction, and welcome everyone to our second peace engineering webinar. I guess it'd be good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world. So again, thanks for joining us. As Christina said, I'm the Executive Director and CEO of ABET, which accredits programs all around the world in 31 countries currently in all STEM fields, traditionally engineering, but computing, engineering technology, as well as some of the applied in the basic sciences, natural sciences. I think it puts us in a really good position, though, in terms of what we see and what we experience around the world, because we really want to position ourselves to be really in the role of promoting and encouraging the open flow of ideas that lead to the development of really globally focused graduates, those that are going to create sustainable solutions that address the world's most pressing challenges, because the world's quite different today than it was when I was an undergraduate, and we really need to really get our graduates focused on the big picture, if you will. So in 2000, the United Nations launched the Millennial Development Goals to improve the quality of life in kind of in the emerging world through partnerships with industrialized nations. And while the goals were promising, it was clear that we needed to be more comprehensive work that really cut across political and country lines and industry sectors as well. So in 2015, they developed this Sustainable Development Goals, which were developed to call for collective impact on and buy-in, really, to solve the world's most complex issues. And if you look at these, I would make the argument that each and every one of these has a huge impact on peace, and through our engineering efforts, how we can solve some of these great challenges to encourage peace around the world. Certainly, if people are living in poverty, if they don't have access to good jobs, if they don't have access to clean water, if they can't breathe clean air, et cetera, et cetera. Again, looking at each and every one of these, I think as engineers and as STEM graduates, I think the future challenges are great and many. And the nice thing about these Sustainable Development Goals, in my opinion, is that it really allows us to focus students in particular areas where they can really not only appreciate the challenges, but get excited about them. So here we have a poll question, and you saw those Sustainable Development Goals that I put up there just previously. And so the first question is, which of these do you think engineers can be the most valuable in helping solve? And shortly we'll see the results of our poll. Okay, Kayla, do we have the results? Here we go. So interestingly, we see decent work in economic growth as the leading goal that we all, as I guess, as engineers, STEM professionals, can help solve. Of course, the real answer is all of them, but certainly we're going to find opportunities for all our students to, again, to get engaged and excited about these. So thanks for taking the time to do that goal. I think that's good to get us thinking in terms of how we can make a difference. I think the students that are online today, certainly the ones that will be joining us in Albuquerque, are going to play a critical role in addressing each of these goals to help us build and maintain a more peaceful world. And again, I mentioned how I think all 17 of those touch on peace engineering, if you will. But we're going to be charged with mitigating the stress of an ever expanding population, and it's quite concerning because we see the population growing at a rapid rate, exponential rate. Yet we know, I think most of us appreciate that our planet can't sustain that kind of growth. So what can we do to help our planet survive and help us as the human race survive? You know, you're going to see all kinds of advanced technologies that'll help us, everything from renewable energy to reducing world hunger. But this is the challenges that our students are going to be faced with in terms of what their future holds. Fortunately, faculty, deans, and other leaders in STEM education are going to be equally challenged, because it's up to us to really make sure students have an awareness and understanding, and even more than that, but embrace these challenges as their challenges for tomorrow. And the key thing, of course, in being successful is having students aware of not just the problems, but how they fit in terms of different cultures and needs, and holistically, how do we develop solutions? Because I always tell people that, sure, we can come up with great technical solutions, but it's going to take more than just technical expertise. We need buy-in from governments, from industry, from sociologists, and it's going to be a real team effort. So understanding the role that higher education plays, of course, is critically important, and so much so that this past year at our symposium, the ABET symposium that we held in San Diego, we focused on this very topic. So I'm going to have Kayla play a short 3-minute video that highlights our symposium and some of the key topics.
Welcome to beautiful San Diego. I'm glad to see so many of you here. This year's theme for the symposium, sustainability, I think is quite appropriate, considering some of the very big challenges that we all face today. And I know that the very best solutions to these tough problems come from teams that are made up of diverse individuals, those with diverse experiences, diverse backgrounds, different cultures. Collectively, I think we are in a great position to help make the world a better place.
The whole organization is about be confident, that we're preparing our engineers to operate in this global environment, and that engineers that graduate from accredited programs are prepared.
So I think ABET is really important in being a convener. They play a really important role in bringing everyone together who needs to be working on this challenge.
This year, the topic, it's about sustainability and how to integrate student outcomes and to serve the community more.
Well, I was impressed the first time I came here with the amount of very clear, very deliberate education. People are always so open to provide the information that we need to take back to our programs to be able to implement the type of changes that ABET is about.
Now, ABET's certainly an accreditor, but that's not the end game. The end game is what impact do we have in preparing students to be successful? Are we preparing them to really embrace and solve some of the bigger problems facing humanity?
I like the fact that ABET is adding additional tracks other than just assessment. It gives you a broader perspective about the assessment and it enriches it.
From the fireside chat to the discussion dance to the themes of the plenaries, this is all coming from the feedback that we received from our participants, because they come here to learn about accreditation and assessment, sure, but they also want to take advantage of being surrounded by their peers, being inspired by people who are doing the work that they love, who are really committed to building a better world today and tomorrow.
Our profession is one of innovation. And we're always looking to improve for the next generation.
What my hope is that those who became aware of things in a different way will start to explore what they can do to make things better, and then start to work as advocates for change.
This discussion would not have been possible had it not been for someone who actually saw the benefit of bringing this diverse group together. At the end of the day, we're all driving towards one common goal, and that is to drive sustainability.
Okay, well, thanks very much for showing that. And again, that's a nice summary, I think, of our recent symposium and the emphasis that we're putting on getting faculty to really integrate some of these topics of sustainability into the curriculum, because again, the students really need that, I think, from the first opportunity. So let me go to the next topic, next slide here. Students can come up with great designs, and I reflect quite frequently on my own undergraduate experience. Excuse me, on my own undergraduate experience with respect to what did I go through when I was in college and as an engineering student and the design. And you know, students can always come up with the best, solid, real robust technical solutions that they can design and test, but it turns out that that's not really necessarily going to solve or address the sustainable solutions, because an example I like to use all the time is electrification of automobiles and transportation. I think most people appreciate the importance that electrification, electric cars and so forth will have on our environment, and how it will reduce you know, pollution and CO2 gases and so forth. But you have to also think about, if I solve this problem through electrification, am I causing other problems, or am I introducing other challenges? For example, mining rare minerals, lithium, for example. Does that mining process, is that going to increase contamination of water supplies? Is it going to destroy fragile ecosystems? Is it going to exploit some type of, you know, illegal labor sort of thing? So really, we can't just solve a problem technically without thinking more holistically about how we address problems in general. So I guess the question is well, how are we going to do this, and what's higher education's role in bringing this to bear? Sustainable development can't simply be learned by reading textbooks or attending activities such as lectures. It really has to be experienced through, again, students' active participation. So here's a poll, ask you a little bit about that. All right, so here's the results, and you can see that certainly diverse perspectives and sharing to solve shared challenges is an important aspect of having students understand the role that they play. But of course, all of these are important. You know, part of the challenge is not all students can study abroad and travel abroad, and so we have to give them experiences closer to home that can help have similar impact. And so certainly anything from learning a foreign language to being placed on diverse teams in terms of cultural background, gender, and so forth is opportunities that we can provide them. We want to provide them a great opportunity for exchanging ideas with a diverse student body. And of course, sustainability doesn't work if it's, if you're really closed to certain aspects of either thought or geography for that matter. So putting an emphasis on diverse viewpoints is going to be critically important to solving global challenges. And then of course, encouraging students to explore opportunities inside and outside the classroom will expose students to the world around them. And I think the beauty of our world today with respect to the social media and those types of opportunities is we do get exposed to the world a lot more than we did just 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. But I do believe that colleges and universities must intentionally cultivate these experiences, because without that encouragement, we're really not going to be as successful as we want to be or need to be. So I just wanted to finish up. Christina introduced the topic of an issue brief that we're going to publish during the Peace Engineering WEEF. And really what we're going to do is look at some best practices from colleges and universities around the United States that have adopted and been successful in creating what we call global systems by adopting some good practices, and look at some case studies also that explore how faculty and student-led initiatives will be successful. We have a couple, University of Illinois and their MOVE project, which is Mobility, Opportunity, Versatility, and Empowerment. As well as an initiative at the University of San Diego that's focused on building and developing, in this case, portable latrine assistance devices, but really focused on helping and serving landmine survivors and persons with disabilities in Uganda. So a couple very different projects, but one that certainly have global impact. And we'll look at more of this when we publish this white paper during the Peace Engineering WEEF conference. So I hope to see you all in Albuquerque and sharing more about this very important topic with you then. So thanks very much, and I'll turn it back to our moderator, Christina.
Thank you so much, Michael. What an interesting presentation. The video was incredibly inspiring, and I'm really looking forward to reading the white paper. I think you provided a lot of practical ideas of what could happen within our universities, and I'm looking forward to reading more of the specifics coming out of those case studies. I'm excited to now introduce Robert Muscat, who's a development economist. He served with the U.S. Agency for International Development for several years as the chief economist, the World Bank, UN agencies, and as an advisor to foreign governments. For a number of years, he lived and worked in Thailand, Malaysia, Kenya, and Brazil, in addition to shorter assignments in many other countries. He has long focused on problems of conflict in developing countries. Dr. Muscat is a board member of Global Peace Services USA, an organization promoting peace education and skills training. Today, he'll be discussing engineering amidst social and political conflict, a challenge to engineering education. His presentation will discuss how engineers need to raise their awareness of the potential socio-political effects of their projects, especially in situations of serious social contention, and to explore alternative designs or engineering solutions and methods of implementation that can ameliorate rather than exacerbate the conflicts. The driving question that we'll explore with his presentation is how can all of this most effectively be taken into account in engineering education? So let's please welcome Dr. Muscat. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. As you can see, as you've heard, I'm neither an engineer nor an educator. So I'm bringing a somewhat different perspective to this set of problems. I have come across for numbers of decades that I've been working in international development, come across some interesting, some important examples of the intersection between engineering projects and social conflict, sometimes violent conflict. So it's what I'm going to do is to focus on this question of how engineering education can lead to greater sensitivity to these issues when they arise in the course of an engineer's career. So I'm going to talk about how engineering projects can figure importantly in conflicts. This relationship can help either avoid or exacerbate problems leading to conflict. These conflicts may be within states, even resulting in civil war, or between states as potential sources of interstate warfare. So I am not going to be talking about, the many very interesting and useful engineering efforts at the village level, so to speak, to improve people's lives. I'm going to illustrate the points I'm making with some very specific examples. And I want to make clear that what I'm going to be talking about has nothing to do with military engineering or weapons, which of course are entirely different subjects, but very important aspects of the role of engineering and conflict. I believe the whole area, the role of engineering as a factor in conflict, has been relatively neglected compared with the enormous attention in recent years given to research, professional training, and development of international norms and organizations devoted to conflict prevention, resolution, and peacekeeping. These efforts have gotten a lot of attention in programs in international affairs, diplomacy, law, political science, sociology, and other fields. Engineering, at least as far as I can tell, has been an orphan subject in this area. Its importance under-recognized. And I find it very encouraging to see that engineering educators are moving into this subject in a big way, as this webinar is an example. So I'm going to give a few quick sketches, examples that illustrate this interface between engineering and conflict. I'll start with two projects in Sri Lanka. They provide a good contrasting set of case studies. In Sri Lanka, you had a long-running civil war from 1983 to 2009. On one side was an insurrection by a militant Tamil ethnic group against the government, which had always been in the hands of the ethnic Sinhalese majority population. The Tamils, with some justification, saw themselves as victims of policies designed to install Sinhalese hegemony and to discriminate against the Tamil minority. And this was reflected in a major engineering project, which I will come to. But first, I want to talk about a smaller project, I might call it mid-sized irrigation project, known as the Gal Oya, which was launched many years before the war began. The farmers along the upper ends of the irrigation channels were largely Sinhalese, while the lands along the lower ends were occupied by Tamil farmers. For the first few years, the Sinhalese were drawing more water than was optimal even for their own use. But that left an insufficient residual flow for the Tamils and caused tension between the two groups. The problem was later corrected when the project authorities created joint Sinhalese-Tamil farmer water user groups to oversee and optimize the withdrawals, which was better for cultivation all along the channels. Subsequently, when Tamil militants from outside the project region tried to persuade the Tamil farmers to stop cooperating with the Sinhalese, the Tamil farmers refused, and the interethnic harmony created by the project was sustained during all the years of the Civil War. In short, a deliberately redesigned project management system created a win-win situation. It was an island of peace and harmony within the wider conflict, which was quite terrible, had many casualties, and took years to resolve. Now, the second example is an interesting contrast, a very illuminating contrast. This was the Mahaweli irrigation project, which was much larger. In fact, the largest civil engineering project Sri Lanka had ever undertaken in its long history. In its original design, the engineers included, on both engineering and economic grounds, a major canal that would have brought a substantial volume of water to farmers in the main Tamil region in the northern end of the island. The project's political authority, however, decided not to construct this canal, ostensibly for technical reasons. For the Tamils, the cancellation was a clear sign of hegemonic intent by the government. The main donors who were planning on financing this large project, the World Bank and the aid programs of Canada and the United States, tried to persuade the Mahaweli Authority to retain the Northern Canal, but they were unsuccessful. The donors even cited the Galoya as a peacemaking demonstration in the same country. This was a major missed opportunity that might have persuaded the Tamils that the Sinhalese were relenting on a hegemonic policy, and that resort to armed rebellion might not have been necessary. Now I'm going to move to an important international case. This involved the Indus River Basin serving Pakistan and India. A dispute over the distribution of the basin's water arose soon after the two countries achieved independence in late 1940s. Thanks to World Bank engineers and the bank's political influence, a grand scheme was designed for dams and irrigation systems that satisfied both countries and avoided what could well have become a cause for warfare. Needless to say, the two countries have gone to war since for other reasons, but at least this one vast engineering scheme ended up a win-win program. There are other well-known cases of conflicts, some violent, that stemmed from other kinds of engineering projects in other countries. These cases included mining and transportation projects, and projects requiring the removal and relocation of entire communities. Looking ahead, one can see engineers being called upon to provide solutions to major conflicts or challenges posed by climate change, sea rise, and severe weather stress. Engineering works will also be central to the huge upstream hydropower programs being developed along the Mekong and Nile rivers, affecting all the downstream countries. Projects like these, programs like these, threaten to undermine the livelihood of downstream populations who are dependent upon fisheries and the annual sediment flow that maintains the fertility of their farmlands. Many of these problems will involve conflicts of interest, both international and domestic. While the engineers will be expected to design solutions that are supposed to be all win-win, there are unfortunately often losers who should be taken into account by project design adjustment or by financial compensation. Efforts to provide financial compensation in numbers of countries in the past have never been adequate, unfortunately. Now, I should say a few words about what I see as the implications for engineering education, although I admit again that I am not an engineer or an educator, merely an economist. But these seem to be some obvious thoughts. First, engineers need to be able to engage in dialogue with different stakeholders involved in these situations. Conflicts can be avoided if they are foreseen and the stakeholders presented with options they can agree on. Stakeholders may include the expected beneficiaries, the potential losers, community leaders, government officials, even clerics. Second, I think engineers need to be able to work well with professionals from other disciplines that might be involved in each case. This is a point that has been made before, even on this webinar. Now I'm thinking of social scientists, negotiation and conflict management specialists, and so on. Third, where engineering contractors are in charge of project implementation in divided communities, whether these divisions are interethnic or religious or otherwise, they need to aim at inclusivity in such operational details as the hiring, local hiring, subcontracting, the languages used in bidding advertisements, and access to training opportunities. These may seem like mundane matters, easily overlooked, but they are not. I'll give a brief example of my own experience. I was involved with an evaluation exercise in Mozambique a few years after the war had been settled and development was being pursued. So it turned out that some engineering projects being financed by the World Bank were in the first place focused in the South, which was unfortunate because that's where most of the people of the one ethnic group were living. So it appeared to people of the ethnic groups occupying the central and northern parts of the country that they were being neglected. But that was corrected. But in this interesting detail, which never would have occurred to me beforehand, and did not occur to the World Bank engineers, all of the advertising on upcoming bidding that contractors could engage in who were interested in getting business on these projects, the bidding advertisements were all conducted in, they were all advertised in only the language of the ethnic group living in the South, which was the group that was dominating in the post-conflict government. It seemed like such a small thing, but when I spoke to a couple of potential engineering contractors whose native languages were not the same, they brought this to my attention and complained that this was a sign that they felt of their being excluded. My impression was it was not deliberate on the part of the government or certainly the World Bank, but it was an example of something that if people were more sensitive to, what you might consider all the sort of peripheral details of project implementation, something that would not have been overlooked. Finally, again, I have no experience on which to base answers to some obvious questions that have occurred to me about how to introduce and integrate these considerations into engineering education. Should there be separate courses in engineering ethics? Short general orientation? Should these questions be included by specifically being designed for different engineering areas like civil, mining, agricultural, and so on? There are many organizations that engineering faculty can seek out on campus to partner with. Social science faculties that have expertise in peace studies, conflict management, and of course, engineering ethics. And many campuses now have institutes that focus on peace education, peace research. who could serve as important resources for the engineering faculties. I should also mention civil society organizations like the one I am affiliated with, Global Peace Services, that work on so-called peace education. I wouldn't go so far as to say that to engineering students, you can save the world, but I would say that in many situations, you can make a significant contribution to peace and harmony. I'd like to make one final observation about engineering education that I haven't seen thus far. And that is that engineers, as they proceed through their career, will be in very different position to have something to say or influence engineering outcomes that are win-win. The graduating student, after all, will be a junior engineer. But that doesn't mean that a graduating engineer cannot, when the occasion arises, bring these perspectives to the fore. On the other hand, older engineers who have risen to positions of decision-making, either in government or in engineering contracting firms, are in a position to bring more experience to bear and can lobby with some strengths. I would finally just tell you about one little project where the engineers did all these things unasked. This was many years ago when I was a junior officer myself in Thailand. At that time, the Vietnam War was on, and people were concerned about whether the efforts of radio propaganda from China or the efforts of Thailand's local Communist Party, which was mounting an insurgency, a low-level insurgency in the northeast part of the country, whether these efforts would succeed in alienating the northeast population from the central government, because the northeast had been neglected by the central government for decades, and for generations, in fact. So the arm of government that was most active in the northeast region was the irrigation department. The irrigation department was run by an engineer. He had a graduate degree from abroad, and he also came from a high prestige family. And he developed a project which, from an engineering perspective and an economic perspective, you would normally think of as a bad project. And the idea was to provide some irrigation, which would at least show that the government was trying to do something to improve the economic circumstances of the people living in that region. And the project they developed was called, they were called tanks. There was very little opportunity to develop big water storage, but it was possible during the heavy rainy season to build these little, relatively small catchment areas called tanks. And then the idea was that during the dry season, the water could be let out from these tanks for supplementary irrigation, for small dry season crops. The tanks, from an engineering perspective, were really quite poor. The soil, the mechanics of the soil were poor for water storage. Seepage was high. So if you had approached this idea of having these tanks beforehand and had subjected them to engineering criteria, any kind of benefit cost analysis or economic criteria, the whole program would have been rejected. But in fact, it performed the useful service of demonstrating government concern. And the whole thing was devised, as I say, by the Thai chief engineer who headed up the Royal Irrigation Department. Well, the donors also went along with helping to finance these projects, even though everybody recognized that from a technical point of view, they were not justified. So I think I will stop there. I'm struck by how much conflict, nonviolent, fortunately, there is in the United States over engineering questions, like the offshore windmill location, or the location of pipelines, or the whole new technology of fracking, and coal mining, and coal-fired power plants with air pollution spreading to other states, causing acid rain in other states, and so on. Fortunately, we have been able to handle these problems through our normal political processes. But in many developing countries abroad, the institutional environment is not yet up to dealing terribly effectively with conflicts of this kind, where there are many apparent losers in addition to the beneficiaries. So I think engineers are in a unique position of being able to offer technological alternatives. And with that, I'll turn the microphone back.
Thank you so much, Dr. Muscat. What an absolutely intriguing and fascinating presentation. I really appreciate the way that you helped us to think about the lens of socio-political effects as we view our engineering projects. And I encourage all of our participants to turn to the Global Peace Services USA website for resources around peace education and skills training. I also encourage you to go to the ABET website, where you will see several resources and white papers, such as the one that will be coming up in our upcoming WEEF conference. We do have a few moments for our Q&A session. Currently, we have one question that is posed to our panelist, and it says that our participant is interested in hearing more about how ABET is envisioning working with other Washington Accord members to promote the certification accreditation of peace engineering competencies globally.
Okay. Do you want me to do? All right, I'm happy to talk about that. Yes, so the Washington Accord, we're up to 20 members now, signatories of the Washington Accord, and one of the premises of the Washington Accord is that we all agree on what we call our graduate attributes, and these are the types of skills, knowledge, abilities that students should have upon graduation, regardless of where they come from, as long as they're, again, part of the Washington Accord. And critical to that is this appreciation for sustainability and sustainable solutions. So it's addressed directly in the graduate attributes. Now, ABET, as part of our own criteria, have incorporated sustainability into our criteria as well. So when we visit programs, we expect to see some evidence that programs are indeed engaging students in this conversation, that it's part of the design criteria, the requirements when students go through a capstone design, for example, that they should be considering sustainability at a more at a holistic level. So we don't prescribe what those criteria should, or those things should look like, but we want to see evidence that indeed that the again, that the faculty are engaging students in that conversation. I think that's a great place to start, because really unless we start talking about it in the classroom with students and they understand it's a shared concern and it's a challenge that all of us face, that it's probably not going to get the type of emphasis that it deserves. So that's one way we do it. I saw another question in there that I'll go ahead and address, Christina, if that's okay. It's from a colleague in India, and they're interested a little bit about how our college can be part of this program in terms of the sustainability and so forth. And I want to just go ahead and talk to that. And because I think, I've been in India multiple times. I typically go 2 to 3 times a year and engage in different activities. And one of them really is talking about, increasing the quality of STEM education in general. And one of the ways to do that, of course, is to get students there focused on problems that are facing their own country. The statistics in India are pretty compelling. Currently, by 2020, they're looking at having 20 cities running out of water. Bangalore has already reached that unfortunate milestone. Something like 600 million people will not have access to water as a result of that. It's projected that it'll affect their global, their economic growth, reducing that by 6% a year, et cetera. So the numbers are pretty compelling in the sense that we got to attack these problems. And I think that getting students in India to look at those problems at the home front is pretty appropriate.
Thank you so much. We have another couple of questions. One is, in your experience, what drives a shift in curricula, such as you are proposing, ethics and sustainability, that is supported by a growing demand in industry for the Sustainable Development Goals?
Would you like me to talk to that one, or Robert? Christina, who would you like to talk to that?
Why don't you go ahead, Michael, and then I think the next question is geared up towards Robert.
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges in faculty is its awareness, right? And I think, again, it's not just making students aware that there's problems with climate change, for example. I mean, I think most people know that, but try to get them to embrace that this challenge is theirs and it's in their best interest to help solve these problems. There's a lot of things to get excited about in engineering. There's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of that we can address, a lot of technical challenges, but looking, I think, at more fundamental issues like, is the air that we breathe safe to breathe? What's going to happen to our energy supply? Can we drink our water? What about plastics and, polluting our oceans and killing wildlife and, et cetera, et cetera. Unfortunately, the list is long, but getting students comfortable about talking about that and the fact that they actually can make a difference. And I think, sometimes we get in the mode of, boy, these problems are just insurmountable, they're inevitable, and the consequences are great, and we just have to deal with it. Well, part of that's true. We do have to deal with the consequences, but we also, through the advancements in technology and getting students excited about this, I think put us in a good position to help actually solve some of these issues.
All right, thank you. Bob, one of the questions is, do we have enough useful resources so that we can teach courses relevant to peace engineering and get the students involved in this area? Could you talk to us a bit about that, please?
Well, my impression following, domestic events in the United States is that the younger generation today is much more clued in and concerned with global problems than my generation was. So I think my impression is that the student body is very receptive to the sort of broadest question of how am I going to make a difference in my life? I mean, besides of course, need to be professionally qualified, to be able to earn a good living and have a good life. But how can I contribute to solving some of these problems which seem to be arising now on a global scale? As I said, I think that that it's more of a challenge to graduating students who in the profession, enter as interns or what have you, than it is to somebody who has been an engineer, working engineer for 30 years, and you know, is able to provide advice to the level of political decision makers or legislators or local authorities. That you know, seems to me to be a difficult issue, because the average graduating student, after all, faces a number of years where his main problem is going to be advancing himself and establishing his or herself as a competent and concerned engineer, but will we only reach decision-making levels after quite a number of years of work. Now, of course, one method is for engineering students and just graduating to belong to organizations that are promoting all these issues of engineering ethics. It's a way to expand their voice. But I think it's something that needs to be specifically addressed, so that the students are thinking about this question of, how do I myself hook into all these problems and try to make a difference.
I'm thankful that our participants are asking such great questions, and to you panelists for being able to respond to them in such an eloquent way. We have another question that piggybacks along that. Could you say more about incorporating an understanding of the drivers of conflict and the drivers of intractability in engineering practice? Bob, would you like to go ahead and respond to that as well?
Well, that is a very large question. The sort of easiest first answer is that not all conflicts are the same. That conflicts are very context dependent, and they differ substantially from country to country, from the type of engineering subject we're thinking about, and they differ very substantially between countries that are that have democratic process and countries that are more authoritarian. In the international engineering, one is more often dealing in authoritarian countries. But the efforts to understand the sources of conflict has advanced very substantially in the last few decades. There are tremendous research resources, and intellectual power has been put to the question of understanding why these conflicts have arisen and why they have been adequately or inadequately dealt with. So I think many campuses, I don't know how many, have faculty or even freestanding institutes that are devoted to this very difficult question of understanding human conflict. That is on a societal level. I'm not talking about interpersonal conflict, which is the subject for psychology. So the resources are there. I think the sort of first operational answer I would come to is that one needs to bone up very quickly on a particular country when one is engaging, starting to engage in a project that has a particular location. The libraries are filled with analyses, and there are many websites that try to keep current day by day in conflicts around the globe. It takes an effort, but the important thing is to know that it is possible to get on top of these conflicts, and it is an important responsibility to make such an effort when embarking on each project and its own context.
I'd like to thank again each of our presenters today and each of you as participants by engaging in this global dialogue around this issue that is so critically important to us all, which is peace engineering education. I am excited again to have us continue this discourse as we participate in the WEEF and GEDC. We will again be hosting this webinar as well as our past webinars on our YouTube channel. So I encourage you to go back and revisit this presentation and view our others. And I'd like to close with Ramiro letting us remember a bit more about our upcoming webinar. Our upcoming WEEF.
Thank you again, Christina. Thank you, everybody, for participating. We had good questions and good dialogue. So let me close by again inviting you to come to Albuquerque, New Mexico, the week of November 12th to the 16th, where the theme of the event is peace engineering.
Yes.
Can you? Okay. So these are the events that will take place during that week. We will have the World Engineering Education Forum. We have the Global Engineering Deans Council. We have a Global Student Forum, and we also will have the first Global Career Fair for students. They can interview with companies, or they can interview with other institutions if they want to pursue graduate studies. So yes, we'll be talking about many things: diversity, natural resources, a lot of the issues that were addressed today. And it is in New Mexico. And interesting things have happened in New Mexico. The most important thing is the birth of big science. This is where the Manhattan Project, this is where the big science was created, and a lot of technology from that project were spun off into many companies. And something interesting also about New Mexico is the crossroads of two types of history: the Hispano history that flows north through south, south through north, that would be Spain. And then we have the Anglo that goes from east to west. So this is an interesting state where both histories meet. And I always have to say this: we're not new, and we're not Mexico. And if you don't know where we're located, well, here's a map. We happen to be in the US between Arizona and Texas. So please come, help us define peace engineering. There's so much to be done. It involves so many different areas, and we need the help of everybody to work on this. And with that, I want to thank you, all of you, for participating, the panelists, the people that have logged in to ask questions. Christina, thank you so much for moderating this webinar. Thank you, everybody.